Ladies and gentlemen, I read the only orc book you need to read to understand orc society. Gazgul, Mad Orc Thraka, Prophet of the Wog. This was such a fun book to read, ladies and gentlemen. I sort of devolved into an orc reading this, seeing as how I am a little concussed. And I kind of adopted the orcish accent, if you will, when I was reading this. And, I became a proper lad, one of the boys, if you will. But I will talk about the book in a separate video, but I'm going to talk about bits and pieces of it today because I wanted to talk about how a lot of people seem to really not understand orcs in a way that is beneficial to them. So obviously, a lot of people, when they think orcs, I think the memes pop up before the lore pops up, which seems to be a common trend with Warhammer fans, because there's the common funny little meme goes around oh yeah, I'm a Warhammer fan, of course I haven't read any of the fucking lore, which is fine. Well, it's not fine. You should go read, because you're cheating yourself out of some really fantastic storytelling and some okay storytelling. But the point is, it's comical, right? It's funny. Orcs are funny. They do the impossible every Tuesday, and they make it, they take a hair comb, make it a las gun, and all is well in the world. It's just another Tuesday for Thraka. But it's not. The orcish psychic field, I think a lot of people really confuse it with memes, and they think that when an orc thinks something, it happens. That's not really the case. When a lot of orcs are thinking something and they believe it wholeheartedly, then the impossible becomes, or the improbable becomes probable. And a lot of people really think that they can make trash and then just sort of make a functioning lasgun. That's not really how that works. If you would read the book, this book sort of describes it as, orcs have to fully and wholeheartedly believe it and then keep believing it, and the more and more and more believe it, and then the tools that are genetically, programmed into them allow them to have the rudimentary ideas to sort of fix the trash that's around them into functional scrap that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's not like a cure-all. If you're an orc, you can't just say, "Oi, I believe this is I can't do the accent, so forgive me, but this is a lasgun because I'm an orc and I think it is." That's just not how that works. If you well and truly believe it, then you can get some of this, and this map of Skyrim, and then you might have a lasgun that goes 2 shots off before you actually have to go loot a lasgun from the guy you just absolutely obliterated. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. The memes, obviously, please don't believe them, because orcs are a lot more complex than that. And also, orcish society is a lot more complex than I gave it credit for, because how I assumed it was, the biggest is always in charge. There's no real, all the clans are different, but are they really that different? I don't think so, but they are. The Blood Axes, the Evil Sons, listen, all these clans, you can almost attribute them, they have almost parallels, if you will, to, let's say, the Legions. Some are more speed-based, some are very tanky, some are more resilient than others, some are very tactical. Like the Blood Axes aren't necessarily, they will prolong a fight or they'll avoid a fight in order to get better loot or to find a bigger fight, which is very unorky. But again, much like Astartes, they have different cultures and different, modus operandi of how they would go about war and achieving said goals. Not every orc is the same, and it's really easy to think they are when you find a meme that, that says they are. But when an orc thinks that, the white means death and what is it? White and red means fast, or blue means this or whatever. It's really easy to think, haha, they do this because they're so stupid, but they're so dumb that it actually works. But there's a lot of old one magic, genetic coding, and psychic fields at play with this. It's not just orcs are dumb, funny guys who just conjure up stupid shit that works. Orcs are these old, almost eldritch beings that have been here for a very, very long time, that are going to stay here for a long time, and they're countless and really numberless, almost like Tyranids, if you will. It is sort of almost frightening to think about, if you will. They are funny in the sense that when you read about them from their perspective, they're hilarious. But when you watch a human who's defenseless getting ripped apart, to a human, this is horrific and scary, but to an orc, there's nothing personal or malicious about it. This is just how the world is, and if you don't understand that, you're the Zog an idiot. And it goes really into depth about the Great Green and the will of Gork and Mork, and how grots are sniveling little bastards who are supposed to be bullied, and how orcs are the supreme species and can bully grots, and the biggest orc is always the boss. And then it introduces you to Thraka, and Thraka really sets apart the orcish tones, because unlike orcs who think everything they do, even when they lose, is the best, Thraka understands, whether you could argue because of the will of the gods or himself only because he's a very unique orc, that he has a goal to do, and he has very little time to do it. So whenever he does something, he's not happy because he knows he's on a time crunch and that he could have done it better. And this, Makari even says, when he accomplished this, I think it was when he was ruling his version of Terra, it was called Uruk. When he did this and united the clans, he was not happy at all. He was frustrated and he wasn't happy because he needed to do more. And it was funny because you can really draw a parallel between the Emperor and Thraka. Thraka is this orc that just randomly spawned, died, came back, but is imbued with such preternatural knowledge that you almost really need to think, are Gork and Mork real? Are they not real? Because the Inquisitor who's questioning Makari, his grot, who's always kind of there and just chilling out and doing all this nonsense with him, kind of makes this allusion to how sort of Thraka has always sort of understood more than orcs, has had this ego that's bigger and more complex than other orcs. Some orcs are brutal, some are cunning. Thraka is both. If Thraka was presented with two choices, the obvious and most orcish answer is to take both, and hence is Thraka's character. And it goes through his whole thing about Armageddon and how it's a holy war, and it's basically his version of a crusade, and there's more parallels you could really draw. I just thought it was fascinating that other people thought this too. There's on Reddit, because I was looking at Makari and what I would think about with this, and someone that really drew the parallels, and I thought, holy shit, this is so clever, because I wouldn't have thought about this. But when I thinking about when I just read the book, Thraka and the Emperor have so many parallels. It really is quite funny in a way. But yes, society for an orc is so different from humans, and that's me stating the obvious, but there's a lot of intricacies, like violence, for example. I watched the Luton video. I'm sure a lot of you have. Luton does some awesome videos. They're super, super in-depth. But, I think what he said was, violence for orcs is no different from a human breathing. They need it to sustain life for themselves, right? And Thraka goes on about how violence isn't an emotional thing. There is no malice or joy, or there's anger, but that anger translates to joy, and how orcs perceive the world is so vastly different from how any other faction perceives anything. And there was something really interesting about this that really stuck out to me, was the headbutt. Orcs headbutt shit all the time, but Thraka sort of is this prime example. When he was leaving his little version of Terra called Uruk with all the united clans to go to Armageddon for his holy war, they encounter demons, and for the first time, Ghazghul's actually happy, and so are the others, like genuine joy. Orcs are always happy because they're always fighting, and you're never not going to fight because you're an orc. But fighting demons was something interesting, and he fights this corn demon, and it's so funny because Makari also has a very good understanding of demons, but in a very dumb way. He's like, yeah, so I understand there's some demons who are kind of the worst representations of human emotion, and how some are about change and enjoying yourself and being gross. But this one was about anger, and Thraka basically beats the shit out of like a greater demon, it's described, and headbutts the warp rift because he beat every demon, including a greater demon, and screamed into the warp to send something bigger, but nothing came out, which is so badass, by the way. That you could just go up to the Chaos Gods basically and say, send something bigger, you bunch of losers, and nothing comes out. So, that happens, and Makari says he headbutts the rift, and then there's another thing where he headbutts the previous boss of Rustspike. But a headbutt's so much more. And the more I thought about it, it was because the headbutt is the most intimate form of violence. And that could be confusing, because I know you might ask, Connor, what are you even trying to get at? It's the most intimate way to express yourself as an orc. It's a way of communication. A headbutt can mean anything from I respect you, I hate you, I'm taking over, anything. And it's so interesting because people think orcs are dumb. Orcs are not dumb in a traditional sense. Orcs are stupid to everybody else because not everybody understands how an orc society works. Orcs are dumb because they're so devolved from what they used to be genetically, be that, the Korks, the Old One creations. We know nothing about Korks, but it's safe to assume if we had to guess, they could have been extremely intelligent, or they could have just been very large, slightly smarter orcs. We don't know. We only get, a little bit from Trezin's gallery, but what we do know is obviously every orc has the genetic, rudimentary blueprints in their body, and the bigger they get, the more kills they get, more experience, they grow, and they grow, and they grow, and they understand more, and they get stronger in this. But Thraka always was imbued with this preternatural sense of everything, and the headbutts from Thraka kind of almost act as a communicative barrier between everything that happens in the story to portray the intimacy of who Thraka is. When he does this, when he headbutts the former clan leader of Rustspike before he claims it for himself, it's not personal. It's described the headbutt. This isn't personal. This is the hierarchy. This is Gork and Mork. There's no malicious intent. I beat you to a pulp and your guts are hanging out, but there's no hatred. There's no ulterior motive. There are no malicious emotions or positive. This is how we operate. And then he bows. He's either dead or he's not. He beats other warlords and they bow. And you're thinking, yes, this is very simple, and of course they're going to bow. Of course they'll do this and this because he's the bigger orc. But it is that simple, but it's not. The headbutt illustrates who he is, how he does things. The headbutt is the will of Gork and Mork. And I know this sounds like a crackpot 7-Eleven tweaker talking to you right now, but bear with me. It is just the most intimate way to describe how you are feeling and to express who you are in orc society. It is the most ultimate form of violence. It's something holy. And to see it played out in the book is like to see a great speech from, let's say, Dorn or Sanguinius. It's a speech without it being verbal. It's almost an interpretative thing that is being shown to you. And it's almost intellectual if it wasn't like a drunk, giant British man headbutting a dude at a bar, basically how it's depicted in the book. But when you read it and you understand the context behind the headbutt and what Thraka does and how he's an intellectual who says, I need to conduct the Great Wog. I need my lieutenants, my beasts to do my work. I need to allocate resources. I need to give speeches and tell orcs not to fight. The most unorcish thing ever, tell them not to fight and to wait until they can fight and to work to bring us into space. To see this orc, who is the most orkiest orc to ever orc, do these things is impressive. But for 1 second, don't ever think that they're dumb, because they're not. They may be stupid. There's that old saying, I may be dumb, but I ain't stupid. They may be stupid, but they are not dumb. We just don't understand them. So when you look at orcs and you think of the memes, don't think of the memes. Read this book, because let me tell you something. I came into it thinking I was going to see a lot of dumb shit that was funny, and I did. But they're not funny. Keep in mind, orcs are tactitious creatures by nature, always plotting and planning. Some are dumb, some are only strong, and some are only cunning. Gosgul is too. And spoiler, at the end of this book, they were interviewing Makari. They were, interrogating him, and there was an inquisitor, a female Ogrin who also happened to be a psyker, and a rune priest space wolf. While such was going on, Makari was baiting them the whole time. The lowest of orc society, by the way. If we were to actually encapsulate how big this orc would be, I'm 6'2", and I'm a hefty individual. I'm about 230, and I could press 325 pounds. You know, I bench a lot. This is how small this orc would really be realistically. This little grotling. Maybe this big. This little thing outplayed the Emperor's second greatest creation, maybe besides the Primarchs and the Custodes. An Inquisitor who's an Ordo Xenos and a Psyker. That Psyker ended up dying. The Rune Priest ended up dying, and so did the Inquisitor, because he fooled them the whole entire time and got Thraka to come and find them and kill them. So yes, we get these bits of jovial, funny, goofy moments of violence, but even the dumbest orc is a genetic weapon, much like the Astartes, bred for violence. They have a unique way of thinking. They are not dumb. They're absolutely not. To outsmart an experienced and seasoned Inquisitor, a Space Marine, mind you, who also is a Psyker, who's conducted a ritual to see into Makari's mind, and this did not faze Makari. Instead, Makari kind of maliciously laughed and said, "I could have told you all that if you asked," because the whole time they thought Makari couldn't speak Gothic. And to kill a female Ogryn Psyker, and Ogrins, much like orcs in this book are described, you can't cleanly kill an orc like Thraka, a giant orc. You can't cleanly kill an Ogryn. And she died fighting. And they still ended up dying because of the weakest, bullied, pitiful, disgusting little grot that is Makari got one over on them. So if there's anything you can take from the video, yes, orcs are funny and goofy and dumb, but they're also very tactical, horrific, and operate on a whole nother level that we can't even fully comprehend. They have such a genetic ingrained hierarchy and perspective that we can only vaguely understand what it means, even when they tell us, the reader, and the in-universe characters, how everything operates and how the history of the greatest orc to live operates. We still only understand maybe a fraction of it. Orcs are dumb, but they ain't stupid, ladies and gentlemen. But that being said, I know I kind of went on a little ramble-damble there. Thank you for watching. I know this was quite a long video, but, you know, please go read this. This was such a good book, and it probably helped that I'm a little concussed, just because I probably had the most orcish perspective ever, seeing as how my brain is currently rattling inside my body. But a really good book. I highly recommend it, and that's all for today. I will see you guys later.